With rising tensions between China and the US in recent years, there were many recent articles that speculate on when China may attack Taiwan. Some predict 2025, others 2027, or some other dates, as you can see here. However, the issue I found about most of those predictions is that they are mostly based on one-sided Western assumptions, while completely ignoring the Chinese perspective and motivations. In this video, I like to share the Chinese perspective on the Taiwan situation and hopefully answer the question, when will mainland China attack Taiwan? To start, we need to first understand that nations don't go to war on a pre-planned schedule. Instead, war happens when certain preconditions are met. Therefore, the right question to ask is, what are the preconditions for China to initiate the armed unification of Taiwan? I like to get to the point, so here they are. China will only attack Taiwan if one of those two preconditions is met. Precondition A, that Taiwan officially declares independence. Precondition B, that the USA is on the table. If those preconditions are not met, China will simply continue in its current strategy, which is to slowly squeeze Taiwan via gray zone tactics. In the rest of this video, I will explain in detail why those two preconditions make sense and hopefully give you a more accurate pictures of the Taiwan situation. Let's explore precondition A. The first precondition for China to attack Taiwan is if Taiwan declares independence. This is pretty obvious since China considers Taiwan as a rogue province. If Taiwan declares independence, China will take military actions. However, I must clarify that it must be an official declaration of independence. A simple speech by some Taiwanese politicians doesn't count. This is because officially, Taiwan is still the Republic of China. There is a long list of procedures before any official declaration of independence. For example, they need to first change their constitution, as well as changing their official name from the Republic of China to Taiwan. Those kind of things take time. So if China eventually take military actions because of Taiwanese independence, it will be a series of events that you will see coming months in advance. It won't be a surprise to anyone. So that's precondition A, very straightforward. Now let's cover precondition B, that China will only attack Taiwan if the USA is on the table. And by on the table, I mean that the USA itself get dragged into the war. Now you must be asking, why would China want to fight the US directly over Taiwan? Doesn't it greatly increase the cost of unification for China? To understand this precondition, we need to first understand what is the actual value Taiwan has for China. And what does China actually want? Because war doesn't begin by emotions. There is always a cold calculus behind it. Something that I've noticed about Western narrative on Taiwan is that it often go like this. China need to attack Taiwan by a certain year because Taiwan has this valuable thing that China want. The two examples that you probably heard of are that China want to take Taiwan because of the TSMC, I mean the semiconductor factories, and the other one is that China need to take Taiwan in order to break the first island chain that's boxing China in. Let's explore these two cases and see if they make sense. Everyone probably still remembers the chip sanction that the US imposed on China back in 2020, which were supposed to cut China's access to advanced chip and to stop Chinese technological development. The narrative was that the only way for China to get access to those chips was to attack Taiwan and to take TSMC. That was the plan anyway. Instead, what happened is that China figured out how to make 7nm chip via their domestic supply chain in just 3 years, making the US sanction worthless. So much for Tuber America, I guess. So, does TSMC has any value for China in the current year? The answer is no. China already figured out how to make advanced chip on their own. TSMC engineers themselves have even said that Chinese fab will probably surpass TSMC within just the next 5 to 8 years. At that point, China may even sanction the TSMC in order to force Western companies to be dependent on Chinese fab instead. China won't attack Taiwan for TSMC. Another reason given by Western experts on why China need to take Taiwan is the idea that Taiwan is essential for China to break the first island chain. This reason was often cited by Professor Mearsheimer himself, who argues that the first island chain is locking China in and that China need to take Taiwan in order to break it. Professor Mearsheimer is very knowledgeable in geopolitics, but I think he and many experts are working with outdated information regarding to both military technology as well as Chinese military capabilities. The reality is that those island bases are simply too vulnerable to situational attack from the mainland to contain China effectively. In 2024, China has such an overwhelming home field advantage over the US and its ally in the Western Pacific that all US bases in the first and second island chain will be taken out within the first few hours of a conflict. Island bases are not going to survive against thousands of continuous strikes from Chinese missiles and drones. Now, most of you are probably thinking that I'm completely insane, that there is no way China could overpower the US militarily in the Western Pacific. A detailed comparison of the Chinese and US military is a topic that I really like to cover in the future, but it is beyond the scope of this video. Instead, let's consider this. During the 1996 Taiwan Strait crisis, the US Navy intervened and stopped the Chinese military drills. Yet when China completely encircled Taiwan in 2022, the US Navy ran away. What happened here? Perhaps there has been a fundamental shift in military power in the Western Pacific that the public simply hasn't fully aware yet. This is why I can say with confidence that while the island chain strategy was an effective way to contain China back in the 90s, in the 2024, those bases are just providing China with more target. So the idea that China need to take Taiwan to break containment is an outdated notion. Okay, so that was a lot of information, so let's do a quick recap. We have established that Taiwan has little tangible economic or strategic value for China. Therefore, from a purely cost-benefit analysis, China is in no hurry to take Taiwan simply because the island is not valuable enough to justify a war over it. That being said, the right question to ask here is, if Taiwan is not valuable enough by itself, what will make Taiwan valuable enough for China to have a war over it? This is the logic behind precondition B. China will only attack Taiwan if the US is involved, because if the US also get dragged into the war over Taiwan, then the war becomes worthwhile for China. To understand this, you really need to grasp how we Chinese think. What China wants is to achieve hegemony over Asia and to establish a Chinese rule-based order. Therefore, our Taiwan strategy should be seen as how it furthers our primary goal of establishing that order. Taking Taiwan itself does not directly contribute to that objective, but pushing the USA out of Asia and back to North America does. The US is the target, Taiwan is just bait. Let's consider the cost-benefit again. China's assumption is this: if we militarily defeat the USA over Taiwan, it would be the end of the Western rule-based order, allowing China to replace it with the Chinese rule-based order. With the USA defeated, the neighboring country will simply submit to the Chinese hegemony. and China and Taiwan would peacefully unify. Why? Because Taiwan's entire defense strategy relies on the expectation that the US will come and save them. If it's the USA that is defeated, Taiwan will simply surrender and unify peacefully. For China, all this is well worth the cost of war. It doesn't make sense to bet $100 to get something that's only worth 10, but it does make sense to bet $1,000 to gain a million. Now you might be asking, claiming that the US is the main target is a rather bold claim. What evidence do I have to support that? Well, here is one from Xi Jinping himself. He has stated that the main goal to the Chinese military modernization is to reach the capability to defeat a strong enemy. And by strong enemy, he means the US. Another evidence comes from this recent article by Jin Cairong, which is a highly influential Chinese international relations scholar. Well, the article discussed the South China Sea. The same logic also applies to Taiwan. The original article is in Chinese, but let me read a small translated part in English. If it escalates to a direct military conflict between China and the US in the South China Sea, the US will surely lose in that region. If the US proactively give China the opportunity, let us give it a beatdown in front of the world, and the 500-year change may happen overnight. Basically, China is not trying to avoid fighting the US. China is actively trying to pick a fight with the US. That's why China will only attack Taiwan if the US is on the table. So let's conclude this video. When will China attack Taiwan? China will only attack Taiwan if and only if one of the following conditions is met: that Taiwan officially declares independence, or if the US is on the table. Those two conditions are of course not mutually exclusive. If Taiwan declares independence, China will most likely escalate in a way to drag the US into the conflict, or until the US cocks. For example, China surrounding Taiwan after Pelosi's visit was to provoke an American response, and the Chinese military drill only ended because the US Navy ran away. Also, such a conflict will not be limited to Taiwan. Instead, it will most likely escalate to a war in the entire Pacific. Remember, what China wants is not Taiwan, but to push the US out of Asia and back to North America, and to establish the Chinese rule-based order. So there you have it, the Chinese perspective and when will China attack Taiwan. I hope that my explanations has been clear, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment. The Taiwan situation is, of course, a complicated subject. This is why I plan to release a short series of video on the subject to hopefully give you guys a full picture of the situation. So this is it. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and let's meet again in my next video. Cheers.